What's happening, guys? Safety Liner C2 here. Since school buses have been a thing, there has always been a constant need for innovations and developments, as there would be in any industry. Questions have been raised for decades about how we can improve safety in school buses, how we can make them more efficient in terms of routing or alternative fuels, how we can make them cheaper in terms of buses themselves or switching to a company instead of a district-owned fleet. However, it seems that very few people are asking the question that Elon Musk apparently decided to answer. What would happen if the school bus became autonomous? Recently, Tesla released its concepts for the Cybercab, a fully autonomous taxi, and at the end of the event, they surprised everyone with a completely different vehicle, the Robovan. The Robovan is supposed to be a larger version of the Cybercab that has room for 20 people, but can also be used for freight transport, a food truck, or even a school bus. I've had multiple people send me this, so here's my thoughts on it. First off, let's just get the looks out of the way. This looks like something that you would find in Office Depot. Obviously, this is just a concept, but the lack of warning lights, the lack of any visible windows, even the lack of rubber rails just diminish the safety of this compared to that of a traditional school bus. Even if Tesla was going to make a school bus, I can almost guarantee that it would not look anything remotely like this. It's a very odd-looking vehicle, and I don't think much more needs to be said about it. Honestly, I'm not even concerned about the looks compared to the logistics and problems that this would potentially bring, so let's talk about that. So with this being fully autonomous, there would not be a driver in there. The AI would take care of everything on its own. Just off the top of my head, there are plenty of things that could happen to the students that a driver would need to take care of. Someone getting sick, arguments between students, a student maybe being a little late and running to catch up to the bus, vandalism. These are all things that an AI would not be able to properly do compared to a driver. Now, for the sake of argument, let's say that a district did buy these and decided to put an 8 on there. Remember that these are only designed for 20 people, so we're already limited in the amount of space that we have, and that knocks us down to 19. That's not even including any extra items that students might bring along. Instruments, sports bags, projects, or even just a large backpack. The biggest school buses you can get right now in terms of capacity seat up to 90 passengers, so there's a pretty big difference in those numbers. Depending on the size of your district, you might need to double, triple, or even quadruple the amount of buses that your fleet has in order to properly accommodate all of the students. And on top of that, these are electric and they're not going to have the same range as a diesel or alternative fueled bus. So you might need even more buses just to make sure that the full routes are covered. My dislike for these has nothing to do with the fact that these are electric. Say what you will about electric buses or even alternative fueled buses, this is just a terrible idea. What happens if an elementary bus gets in an accident? There wouldn't be an adult on board to make sure that everyone's okay. The technology would call someone, then they would relay a message to someone else, and then that person would eventually arrive on scene making sure that everything on the bus is okay, rather than right in the moment and the driver being able to handle it. What happens if there's construction going on? I've seen videos of autonomous vehicles trying to navigate through construction zones or one-way streets or what have you, and this can result in some very dangerous situations if the bus was to start driving on the other side of the road, or even stopping completely if the AI doesn't know what to do. Yes, I do understand that the AI would need time to learn and that it has improved over time since it was initially released, but when you're transporting the most precious cargo, there's no room for errors. But it seems there already have been some errors. Not with the Robovan, but with autonomous school buses in general. Back in 2018, a company called Transdev launched a pilot program for autonomous school buses in Babcock Ranch, a community near Fort Myers, Florida. This article states that the company had gone through months of testing, and that an attendant would remain on the vehicle when it was in service. Further, it would only run on Fridays, and parents would be allowed on during the whole ride. The quote-unquote bus was the Easy Mile EZ10 Gen 2, a 12-passenger vehicle that somehow looks even more ridiculous than the Robovan, almost like a toy. Much like the Robovan, there are no traditional school bus safety features on here, aside from it being yellow. Fake rubber rails are painted on, there appears to be a small AC unit up top, and I'd be willing to bet that a few people could easily lift it. Much like any other bus, it picked up students at designated stops, but at a later point in the pilot, students would be able to book a ride through an app. The problem with the Transdev bus is a simple but major one. they lied to the government about what they were actually doing with it. According to this letter from the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, in early 2017, the company had sent a request to import 2 autonomous vehicles for testing and demonstration purposes between model homes on private roads. The agency approved this in March of 2018 and said that the company must notify the agency before if they were to use the vehicles for anything other than what was approved. The NHTSA further stated that had they known it was going to be used as a school bus, there would have been multiple other factors to take into consideration to make sure that the quote-unquote bus met all of the same rigorous standards that all other buses have to meet, and that the testing was putting the students at risk. They then ordered Transdev to stop all school bus-related usage and to only use the vehicles for what they were previously approved for. Transdev released a statement shortly after saying they believed they were within the requirements of testing and demonstration. They further stated that the bus had the same 5 students on a 3-block long route, the vehicle's top speed was 8 miles per hour, and that the parents of the students on the bus had given prior approval. Another company wanted in on this action too, Teague, which created the Hannah concept bus. Much like the other two, Hannah is a driverless school bus that looks like a poorly designed Hot Wheels. As far as I'm aware, this has not been on the roads before and remains only a concept. On their website, Teague lists 3 major reasons that they wanted to design this. First, to make pickup and drop-offs a little bit safer. With Hannah, the bus would pick up every student in front of their house instead of designated stops. In addition, the bus has doors and ramps on both sides of the vehicle so the student is always picked up and dropped off curbside. This is possible due to the bus not having a dedicated front or back end. This is also how the name Hannah came about, being palindromic. They say that this would reduce the amount of students who would have to cross the street and any unnecessary routing, in addition to no longer needing certain federal safety regulations such as stop signs, as they would always be dropped off in front of their house. Interesting concept to say the least, but to that point, take a look at some New York City school buses. Sure, those are designed for one-way streets, but it would make sense to implement them in more places than just New York. On top of that, who's to say that the students would go home and not like to their friend's house or something, even if they are dropped off directly in front of their house? The second point is to utilize buses for stuff other than just student transport. Teague says that buses are only transporting students for a small fraction of the day, and that there are plenty of miles driven with no students on board. As a driver myself, I can confirm that that's very true. But they say that the buses can be turned into Amazon lockers, Starbucks delivery vehicles, or charitable donation bins when students are not being transported, which would allow the buses to make a profit. Now, I've already done a full video on school buses potentially being used like this, so I'll link that up here and keep my thoughts simple. The more any vehicle is used, the more maintenance it's going to need. The faster it's going to wear out due to high mileage or irreplaceable damage, and you're just going to need to buy more. School buses are not necessarily meant to make a profit, unless you're like First Student or Durham, but that's a completely different thing. They're public transportation vehicles. The third and final point is that they would be easier to supervise than regular buses. Hannah has seats for 6 passengers who would be able to access the bus using iris scanning, making sure that only authorized passengers can get on the bus. In addition, there would be verbal reminders for seatbelts and forgotten items, and remote fleet monitoring to see what's happening on the buses at all times, which they say is important because it, quote, allows for immediate intervention in case of an emergency. Hannah always knows who should be on the bus, where they get on and off, and their unique schedules. As a driver myself, this whole point just irks me. It can be a little difficult to remember at first, but I know who gets on and off where, and their names, and even some of their schedules for when they'll be riding and when they won't be. And even if I didn't know any of that, solutions such as Zonar solve these exact problems. This immediate intervention, give me a break. Like I said before, all that's going to do is just call someone who will then have to go deal with it rather than actual immediate intervention. Again, consider what would happen if an argument was to happen on the bus. Is the bus itself just going to tell them to stop? Or is someone going to call into the bus and tell them to stop? I'd be willing to bet that that would just continue on and be ignored. On that note, if there is someone watching the cameras, it's not just going to be for one bus, it's going to be for multiple buses, and I guarantee that. So now you've only changed the problem from one person watching the equivalent of one full bus in one bus to now watching the same amount over multiple buses and probably even more. So what happens if there are multiple situations that happen across various buses? Anyways, moving on, there's one other bus that we're going to talk about, the Volkswagen SEDRIC. This is essentially just the same as the other buses we've talked about, just with the VW name slapped on it. Volkswagen said that the design was meant to be youthful and would hold 4 students. On the inside, there would be an entertainment screen meant to make travel time to and from school seem a little shorter, which seems to be the only somewhat reasonable idea I've heard across all of these manufacturers. The exterior would have a LED screen up front telling other drivers when to stop because the bus is loading or unloading. I already have a problem with people running my LED stop sign and flashing warning lights in a bright yellow vehicle 4 times the size of theirs, so how on earth are you going to get people to stop for this thing? School buses are not just vehicles that can be manufactured like any other vehicle. They are held to higher standards because of the age and amount of passengers that they carry. Ignoring basic safety features that all modern school buses have is irresponsible and dangerous. I'm fully aware that these are all concepts and these are decades away and we're not going to see them on the road anytime soon. While I see some of the problems that manufacturers want to solve with these, in my opinion, there would be even more and bigger problems that would arise if these were to be implemented. And I haven't even mentioned the fact that these would need to be constantly connected. What happens if they are disconnected or there's a glitch or something? Are they just stuck in place? Instead of focusing on removing the driver in place of an electric automated school bus, why don't we focus on the problems we already have? How can we better retain drivers in our industry? Why don't we work on refining electric buses, or any alternative fueled bus for that matter, to the point where they're not a constant problem and can be more widely used across the country? Even cutting the school bus out of it completely, why don't we work on creating better public transportation overall? I feel like by the time these autonomous buses would be safe enough to implement on a large scale, online schooling would be more widely used and there wouldn't be as big of a need for these. Alright, I'm going to end my rant there and simply say that it's just a terrible idea. I do want to say though that I think the common theme across all these manufacturers, and if there are any other companies that do want to try and implement this in the future, it seems that they don't really have any hands-on experience with school buses. And I say this not only as an enthusiast, as someone who has been watching this industry for as far back as I can remember, but as a driver who has dealt with these problems before that I don't think an AI could just come in and easily solve. And even from a manufacturing standpoint, it's almost as if they didn't look at any other school buses. And yes, I understand that these are concepts, and again, these aren't going to be around for decades, but there are certain federal and just industry standards and regulations that need to be followed for good reason. You can't just paint a vehicle yellow and call it a school bus. Okay, now I'm actually done, and I'm just going to award 1 point to the StarCraft Dodge for at least having warning lights and rub rails. Didn't think I'd have to stoop this low, but here we are. Now it's your turn to chime in. Let me know in the comments below what you think about autonomous school buses in general, any one of these specific buses, how ridiculous they look, anything related to that. Let's have a conversation. This one should be really interesting. And with that, that's going to do it for this video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I always do appreciate it. Make sure you subscribe right down here. It's a magical white button that says you are now subscribed to Safety Liner C2. Make sure you comment up here, down here, over here, or over here. I don't know where they put it down, I care where they put it. Make sure you also give this video a thumbs up, or autonomous school buses are coming out a lot sooner than you think. And make sure you also share this video with a friend. Show it to your mom, show it to your dad, show it to a guy on a random street. I don't care, don't let anything happen to you. So yeah guys, that's gonna do it for this video. Thanks for watching.